right. So let's go ahead and get into our warm up first, figure out what we're doing today. The warm up is going to ask you for your favorite one on one conversation that you remember from recent memory. As we get into interpersonal communication this week, think about the last one on one conversation you had with someone. Why do you remember it? What made it great and what made it memorable? My personal example, I wrote this last semester, but it still works really, really well. After the first week of school, I visited my mom. She's a bit older, and we've been very careful with the virus still being a real threat. And I was stressed. I was emotionally exhausted. I wanted to crawl in my bed and forget the world was on fire. But during that conversation we had, she reminded me that I can't be expected to shoulder the problems of the world all on my own. She reminded me that I put good back out into the world, so I should focus on that. She reminded me that I was loved, and I should give that love back to my students who need it just as much as I do, if not more. It was something I really needed to hear that day, and I've thought about that conversation ever every day since, or ever since. Both would be grammatically fine. So that's a last really good conversation that I remember having. Of course, I've had plenty since then, but that's a good one that I think I still want to keep as my teacher example. So remember to interact with this at some point throughout today. But with that being said, let's get into our notes. If you are taking notes with a pen and paper, then get your pen and paper ready. If you are taking screenshots with your phone, then get your phone ready. If you are just going to listen, then get your ears ready. We'll get started in 3 chair turns. As a reminder, all of these slides come with preloaded audio. That is not me talking, but it is Dr. Rodriguez talking, who is another Comm Apps teacher. It's great information. Definitely useful. She has a doctorate in it. I think she knows what she's talking about. I also know what I'm talking about. So we'll see how we get into it. But it's been 3 chair turns. I'm slightly dizzy. Let's talk about interpersonal communication. Now, the first thing that I want to cover, like I covered last week, is there is a huge difference between intrapersonal and interpersonal. So last week it was INTRA, and this week it is INTER. So think about an interview. That's you getting interviewed by one other person, right? Think about the interaction model. That's the model with 2 people communicating. So in this case, interpersonal communication is, like we said, communication with one other person. So like Khalid said in the song this morning, can we just talk? All right, what is interpersonal communication? Interaction based on sharing of emotions, ideas, or information, also known as communication, usually face-to-face. Interactions between 2 people. Scholars say 3 in a conversation is considered small group communication. So in order for it to be interpersonal, it has to be 2 other people. You send a text to your friend, interpersonal. Your friend texts you back, interpersonal. The minute you get into a group chat with 3 people or more, that is small group communication. We will talk about group communication later on in the year. But for now, we're focusing on one-on-one. It is interpersonal communication. This means the interaction is based off of societal roles and is usually transactional. Okay, so usually people will talk to one other person because they need something, or because they want to make something known, or they're trying to get a message out. Hey, Dad, I really need to talk to you about this one thing. Hey, friend, I need to borrow your car, or I need to borrow some money, or hey, can you give me the notes from math class because I really need that. So usually when we're reaching out to one other person, it's because we're reaching out to that one person because they have one thing that we need from them, or they might possibly need for us. Hey, I'm just checking on you to make sure you're having a good day. Hey, is everything going okay? I saw your tweet and it made me a little worried about you. Hey, I saw your story and I just wanted to make sure that you were safe and that you were okay. All of those are examples of interpersonal communication. Reaching out to one person, or that one person reaching out to you, so that you can have a one-on-one conversation. Now remember that communication does not need to be vocal all the time, but in most instances, we are either texting, like the English language, which would still count as verbal communication, or we would be talking. So those are the 2 most common examples. We only have one other slide to look at, which is the imagined interaction theory. So I'll read it a little bit and then I'll go into more detail. This is a communication theory that bridges intrapersonal and interpersonal. Let's get that underlined. Imagined interactions are described as the pre-scripting or re-scripting of conversations that we are planning to have or have already had. We use that as a way to prepare our expectations and potential topics or arguments for conversations. We also use it as a way to process past conversations and develop schema for further use. So, think about the last really important conversation you had to have with your friend, or maybe your parents, or maybe something like that. You probably thought about what you're going to say before you say it, because people don't usually just walk up and wing it, right? So when you did your bag speech, you were thinking about what you were going to say. As I was grading through the bag speeches that got turned in this weekend, I saw a lot of you guys looking off of the camera just to be like, okay, I want to make sure that I said exactly what I wrote down, because you pre-scripted. You basically decided what you were going to say before you actually said it. So that is exactly what this is, the imagined interaction theory. When we're not interacting with people, we're thinking about interacting with people. Now, we kind of covered this already in the transactional model, because basically that model states that we're always communicating. We're either directly communicating with someone, we're thinking about what we're going to do when we're communicating with them, or we are thinking about the communication after the fact and making subsequent changes. So the imagined interaction theory basically states part of the transactional model, whereas if we are talking with someone right now, we usually thought about that conversation before we actually had it with them. Okay. Hey, I need to talk to you about something. Send. Hey, once you're done with school, come in here because we have to talk about something. Send. Hey, I needed to talk to you. Can we talk like after class? All of that pre-scripted, thinking about what needs to be addressed beforehand. So that's really all that the imagined interaction theory is. But the idea is that, of course, we think about what we're going to say before we say it. And we think about what we're going to say to specific people before we actually reach out to that specific person. Even if you're not expecting to interact with them that day, you still might, like while you're actually listening to them, think about what you're going to say. And so you might have some people that when you talk to them and you argue with them, they weren't ready for you to argue with them. So things might get unnecessarily heated, or they might get, diffused, depending on who you're communicating with. But that is really all the notes for today. Super quick, super simple.